Good evening. Welcome to the Bennington Select Board's meeting with the IACP. We are here tonight by Zoom to hear from the IACP their recommendations on the Bennington Police Department assessment. This has been a long process for us. Many of you probably saw their presentation that's been on CAT TV for the past 2 weeks. We hope you did see that, but they are here with us tonight to answer your questions. So before we start the meeting, I have to give a little bit of information, which is due to the COVID-19 pandemic state of emergency declared by Governor Scott and pursuant to Addendum 6, Executive Order 0120 Act 92, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. There is no physical location to attend this meeting. However, the public may view it on CAT TV and call in at the numbers that we will provide momentarily. If technology fails us, the meeting will be continued at a time and place to be determined. And we will not be taking any votes tonight. The select board's role is to listen at this point. But I will tell you that we'll be taking all of this up in the very near future at our subsequent meetings. So before we start our meeting, I would like to ask the select board members to please introduce themselves, starting with you, Bruce.
Hi, Bruce Lee Clark. Thanks for watching.
Jean, you didn't get unmuted. I'm going to see if you can try that again.
Ashley, you're next. You're next.
Hi, this is Jean. Jean, you didn't get to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jean Connor.
Hello, I'm Jeannie Jenkins.
Good evening, this is Jim Carroll.
Good evening, Sarah Perrin.
Great, thank you. We're getting better at this. It's a slow process, but by the time we get it, we'll hopefully be meeting in person again. So we have three people with us that have been with us in this community for a long time as we've worked through this process. And I'd love to have you introduce yourselves. Dr. Lee, would you like to start this?
Yes, good afternoon or good evening. This is Dr. Jesse Lee, lead consultant with the International Chiefs of Police, and I've spent a lot of time in Bennington and I enjoyed it.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Carl Maupin. I'm an assistant director with the International Association Chiefs of Police. Within our team is professional services section, which completed the assessment for the Bennington Police Department on behalf of the town of Bennington. Happy to be here and assist with answering questions this evening. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Megan Casanova, and I am the staff lead for this project.
Okay, thank you. Also on the line is the town staff and CAT TV, who are making this available by television and Facebook Live. So just a quick note on the process tonight, the way this will work, we are going to momentarily turn this over to IACP, let them give a little summary of what they've done during the past couple of weeks. They've been receiving questions by email from the community. They'll be responding to those questions and anything else they want to say, frankly. At that point, we will open up phone lines and allow people to call in to ask questions of IACP. So this is really, as I've said before to people, and I think I said this in the paper the other day, this is a long game for us. You know, we're not going to fix this all at once, and we're not going to do this all at once. We're going to spend the summer working on this. And tonight, the select board is just going to listen. So questions should be directed to IACP. Questions should be directed to the report and what you read in the report and what you want to know about the report. But as far as what the select board feels about things, we're going to work on that during the course of the summer in public session. So that will all be something that people can participate in, and we hope you will participate in it. But for tonight, we're really going to focus on the IACP report. So as I say, this is really a process for us. This is a process. It's not a checklist. This is not a list of things that we are going to tick down and just check off and be done with it. This is a community process that we all have to participate in. And to help our community thrive, the most important thing is that this work become a community priority for all of us. And I know it is for this board. It certainly is for me. But we really can't do it without the rest of the community feeling it's a priority as well. So hopefully tonight is one of the first steps in that process. And as we move along, we'll work towards steady evolution of our police department in what feels like a positive direction. So I am going to turn this over to Dr. Lee. Would you be taking the first shot at this? Or Megan, would you be starting out with this? Where should we start?
We're going to, just so everyone understands who IACP is and who came in to do the assessment, Carl's going to give a brief overview of the IACP, and then we'll turn back to Dr. Lee to give an overview of the project, and then to go through some of the questions that we received.
Great.
Thank you. Again, we appreciate the opportunity to be able to answer questions directly to the community for the town of Bennington. The IACP, for those that are unaware, is a member-based, not-for-profit organization. We are recognized as a global leader in policing, with our vision being advancing the future of the police profession. So the IACP completes a number of assessments similar to these around the country each year, looking for ways that we can help police departments improve their internal operations as well as their connection with the communities that they serve. This report that we've presented already and we're answering questions on tonight would not be possible if it wasn't for the participation of every member of the community, as well as civic groups, as well as direct interviews with members of the town staff, as well as with the police department. So we appreciate the participation from everybody in answering our questions, giving us unfettered access to the town and to the police operations to be able to complete this report. So that's the quick overview. Megan, I'll turn it back over to you and to Dr. Lee.
Okay, basically on the report, what we did was we had the opportunity to come down to Bennington. We made ourselves available to as many community people who wanted to meet with us. We met with individuals from both corporate individuals who went to a lot of the communities. We met the community members where they felt comfortable meeting, whether it was their residence or different meeting facilities, whether it was a church facility, wherever the community wanted to meet us, whatever time they wanted to meet us, some over the phone. So we made sure that we were able to reach out to a broad group of members within Bennington. And I can tell you that overall, everyone loves the city of Bennington. They love their where they live. They're there because they want to be. And we had the opportunity to speak with many people. There were some individuals who attended the meetings, did not openly talk, but they did take the opportunity to fill out a survey. That survey was brought out so that everyone had an opportunity. We extended the survey to make sure everyone had an opportunity to take the survey as much. It was broadcast, it was notified through many methods to let everyone know that the survey was out there. And we also extended that process. Once we took the data back with us, we then began to do our research, and if we had any follow-up, we would actually call on individuals to provide us additional information to fill any potential gaps. The methodology we used was based on a quantitative and qualitative, where we actually interviewed individuals as well as did survey instruments. And we tried to do a coalition and combination between the two, and it gave us the information that we were seeking for. We did a review of policies, procedures of the police department. We looked at websites, we looked at different things that they had the opportunity to present us. Some were received over the mail, some were received while we were there. And it was a continuous process up until, I guess, even a month or so. So this is an ongoing process, and we're here to present the findings of that report for you today. We did receive a number of questions, and we'll try to answer those the best we can. And for those that we can't, we will present them back to the city to answer at another time.
Megan, may I jump in just for a minute here, please? I forgot to share the call-in information. I'd like to put it up on the screen for just a minute. And for those of you watching, I apologize. I'm going to put up on the screen the way to call in. This will be how to call in and speak to the IACP representatives in a couple of minutes. So jot this number down if you think you might want to call in. It's 1-646-558-8656. You'll be asked to enter a meeting ID, which is 868-6046-6981, and then press the pound sign, and you have to press it a second time. And at that point, you will be in the meeting, but you'll be in the waiting room. So you'll be on hold, and you won't be able to hear, on your phone, you won't be able to hear this meeting. You can continue to watch it on TV or however else you want to watch it, but you'll stay on hold until we're ready to enter you into the meeting for the question and answers. And we'll let people in one at a time as we see their calls coming in. So there's people in the waiting room already. I apologize if the instructions on this were not clear, but go ahead and keep watching this on CAT TV. When you're ready to call in, you're welcome to use this call-in number and meeting ID. And again, we'll take all of the calls in the order that they're received. So apologize for interrupting your flow there, but I did want to get that out. Go ahead, Megan.
Okay. So overall, we received 40 questions/comments. We are going to be going through the questions, and I will read each one, and then I will defer back to Dr. Lee. So one of the first questions we received was, how does the Bennington Police Department demonstrate policies and procedures are communicated, understood, and practiced by all staff? Dr. Lee?
Megan?
Yes. Did you need me to read this? Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
Sorry.
My headset was up. How does the Bennington Police Department demonstrate policies and procedures are communicated, understood, and practiced by all staff?
Okay, and I can just give you a broad approach on this particular question. Typically, all policy is set from the top down, so the chief, the second in command, would actually make sure that the policies are received, followed through, and acknowledged by the officers. This is usually done through a roll call method, where they would actually have the opportunity to have the policies presented to those individuals. They would have the opportunity to review the policies to make sure that they are there, clear for understanding.
The next question was, who is responsible for maintaining policies and procedural records within the department?
Well, based on our review of the policy, is the second in command of the department. The chief actually, again, signs off on all policies. The lieutenant actually holds on to the reports, and at that time make sure that they're disseminated to the sergeants and the patrol.
Question number 3. What is the procedure for updating policies and procedures regarding making sure all documentation updates are current and best practices?
Well, in the report, some of the best practices we identified there is that the policies, the best practice is review policies at least 6 months to a year. Definitely make sure they're updated at least on a year. Some policies will be mandated either by through constitutional law or other state departmental laws that may be put down to the police department on a state and county level. Those things need to be updated more frequently as they come out. There was a lag time that we discovered in the report that there was lag time on updating policies. Recommendations have been set forth to make those corrections.
Question number 4. Who decides when a policy or procedure requires evaluation?
Okay, currently that falls under the chief of police is responsible. And we did make recommendations that legal and depending on certain policies will be reviewed either by the town or some legal entity as well.
The next question, we are deferring back to the town. The question was, how much did the report cost? And if there was a cost, who paid for it? So Don, if you want to just table those and move forward.
Oh, we can send that to Stu. You probably have that number on the tip of your fingers, right, Stu?
I'm mute here. Yes, $66,000. And the monies actually were set aside from the last fiscal year in anticipation of moving forward with a study of this type.
The next question was about the summary given on CAT TV and if we would be presenting the report again in a different style. So I will turn that question over to Dr. Lee.
Will we be presented again?
Yes.
This is actually our final presentation. We do have the full report presented to the city and it will be posted. So the report's actually available for anyone to review at the discretion of the town.
Okay. The next two that came in were statements. So we were going to just skip past those. The next question is, how will members of the Civilian Oversight Board be selected? And I just want to note that the report recommended a Civilian Advisory Committee, not a Civilian Oversight Board. Those are two different things. And that question does tie into the next one, which is, will you be starting a Civilian Advisory Committee? We cannot answer if they will, the town. We would have to defer back to the town on that one. But we can talk generally about how members of the Civilian Advisory Committee could be selected. Dr. Lee?
Yeah, and again, it depends on what method the town agrees to accept, which process to go to, and that's going to take a lot of discussion amongst the whole group as well as the police department and the community. It's a focus where everyone's involved. So the process would be, how would you go about vetting individuals for that particular process, that board? What type of qualities or qualifications would you look for? Also timelines. There will have to be a board of select. Who's going to select these individuals and the timeline they would serve. And then again, who's going to vet that process out or who would actually be able to select. And that would really predicate on what type of board you would get. The Civilian Oversight Board and a Civilian Community Relationship type boards are two different types of boards, and there were two different types of questions, and it would be also two different types of processes you would have to go through as far as vetting those individuals as well. All right, the next question, again, very similar, and I think, Jesse, you probably have addressed this, is what is the plan to form a Citizens Oversight Board with subpoena power? How will this board include a balanced representation of all community members? And again, that would actually have to go back to the town because that's something that the town and the police department would have to agree upon. And what that looks like and what type of powers that board would have would definitely have to come from, I guess, the laws within the state of Vermont and within the city, as well as what the board would like to be able to provide that type of board, that type of power. Some actually have powers to review internal affairs. Some do not. Some have a say in personnel issues as far as review of complaints. Again, that's something would have to come back to the town and for you to decide, research, and continue to work what's going to be best for the community and the town itself. Okay. The next question is, what will the timeline and process be for policy updates and coming into compliance with Act 56? Will people whose complaints were mishandled be notified? Will their cases be resurrected? Again, this is a question I think we would have to turn back to the town answer. That's not really something that we can answer specifically. But if you want to talk a little bit about, again, the process for policy updates and some of the things that we've discussed previously. Well, some of the things you also mentioned about the complaint process. Some of the things the police department had already started the process. They actually updated their website, so you can go to the website and file a complaint now. It's like 2 clicks away, where previously you would not have had the availability or wasn't visible. The police department has updated their website. It's very user friendly. You can go there, file a complaint, and it will allow for a quicker response. You can also be able to provide feedback a lot quicker. And that link is not only for negative complaints, it's also for positive feedback that you might want to give towards the police department. It might have been something they did well. That's on the website, 2 clicks away, and you can find just about everything you need. Other resources, how to reach out to the police department if you have an additional complaint. All that is detailed now on the website, and it is user friendly. As far as the policies, this is one of the things that was recommended, that if you do have a community advisory board that will help work with the police department and help them develop policies with them collectively in a shared process. Again, that timeline would have to go back to the town and the police department to work out those timelines to address those issues.
The next question actually deals with the timeline for implementation, so that is something we would have to defer back to the town. And as Don said, that's a process that's going to be ongoing through the summer. So didn't want you all to think we were skipping that question. It's just simply not one that IACP can answer. It's an ongoing process. The next question is, how will you develop a community policing advisory program with the direct engagement of marginalized persons in Bennington?
Again, that falls into that same piece of the community advisory board. There needs to be a process where you can actually develop, and I think we mentioned having a community liaison individual from the police department that would work with the community, work with the town, and develop in this process of selecting that. This can be done within a 6-month to a year process. It has to fall into alignment of part of the strategic plan for the police department in the town and help them develop this process. So the timeline actually goes back to the police department. We can tell you that it's not a heavy lift process on this particular piece. It's identifying the right person to be the liaison for the community to take this on and then actually work with the community to implement these processes.
The next question was, how will you determine and measure what is sufficient training to officers to manage discretion in their practice?
Well, one of the things we recommend is that they need to use their data to select where are their calls for service. If a lot of their calls of service is geared towards mental health, then their training needs to reflect their calls of service. If they're receiving training and partnerships with other organizations, again, training is also budget driven. So the timeline on that also has to play in a role of what budgetary reasons, manpower, the availability to have the training implemented. So there's a lot of things in the process of that takes place. But one of the key things is identifying what training needs to take place, utilizing the data that's collected within the agency based on the number of calls for service that they receive, the number of complaints, and what those complaints consist of, applying your resources to those particular concerns. That relates on additional training that may be necessary. And based on what we've seen, Bennington had a lot more calls for service for mental health calls for service, and therefore they need to update the training. We looked at implicit bias training that's mandated by the state. Those are type opportunities to make sure that it's not just a week training, but ongoing on a lot of the training dealing with mental health issues. It's going to be an ongoing process. They're not going to learn everything they need to know in dealing with the populations they're dealing with in a week or a month's training. It's going to be continuous ongoing training. And that's something that they can leverage to work with some of the partners in the community that we had the opportunity to meet that are offering to give their service to help train the police department and mental health notifications and how to process these as well.
The next question is actually very similar, which was how do you measure trainings in general, which I think, Dr. Lee, you answered pretty sufficiently. The next question is, who will decide which of the 25 recommendations will be implemented? Who will be responsible for seeing that the recommendations are implemented to criteria? So again, this is a question that we would defer back to the town. As John said, this is an ongoing process, and there's a lot of discussion that typically surrounds implementation of recommendations. The next question, so again, very similar, I think, to ones you've already addressed, but I'll defer back in case there's a little bit more. What will be the plan for including diverse and marginalized voices in all of these discussions?
And again, that goes back to the town and to the police department and making sure they provide an outreach and an opportunity. A lot of the programs needed to be a little bit more, I guess, time sensitive, location sensitive, based on the needs and availability of those individuals. So again, that goes back to the police department, and when they create that liaison for the community, I think that will close that gap and diversifying the things that they need to do as far as outreach.
The next couple of questions are very similar, and they are, how can a police department address the balance between a warrior and guardian, the warrior and guardian roles?
Well, I think they took the approach initially by revamping the website. When you first went to the website, everything you seen was very tactical, meaning that individuals were in military-like hardware, hats, assault weapons, and everything else, even in About Us. That process, they've already took that to light. They updated the website. That was a big start. That when you go to the website, it seems like we now have a department that's more engaging and not more use of force, but more open to the community. That there starts the tone, the website, because a lot of times the individuals, that's their first, if they really don't meet the officers, if they got a complaint, they want to go to the website, they want to make sure it's friendly, usable, and everybody seems approachable. Coming into the building as well, they've set the tone to revamp the buildings that when you walk in, it's more engaging and not feeling like when you come there that you are being part of, you feel like you're victimized again. And I think they took steps already to make sure that that's no longer there. And again, perception is reality, even though it may not have been. It was the individual's perceptions that we received, and we're only reporting what we were told. So when we look at that whole process, the police department has an outreach, and we heard that officers that engage the homeless, that's a officer, but a lot of that the story didn't get told. We happened to find out because we asked the question. There are some officers there that go out, sit down, have meals with some of the homeless individuals. But now the website is set up in a place where they can actually tell their story and not wait for someone else to tell their story. So the officers were doing good things, but there was just not marketing it to the right places. And it just got to some places and not others. So I think that working with the media, working with the community, having the community on liaison, not only will they know that they're doing things, they'll understand the purpose behind what they're doing. And I think that's critical as well. So having coffee with a cop didn't mean anything unless you told them the meaning behind it. So now that they're able to get out there and understand why we do what we do, I think that's going to be another plus in helping build that better relationship with the community. Just they needed to know the why.
The next question, Jesse, you've actually already addressed, and that was the update about being able to file complaints with the Bennington Police Department. That is an update that they've already made to their website.
Yeah, that is an update. And then you also had a commitment from the police department to have a more organized response back to the community. These are things that they didn't wait for the report to come out. These were things that came up in discussion. and they did actually move forward on this and not wait for the final report to come out. They did actually start to implement this process with the implementation of the website and the follow through. We'll find out as they go through any complaints. We'll be able to verify that.
The next question was, how soon would the Bennington Police Department website be redesigned for timely access to information in the process to lodge complaints as recommended in recommendation 13? So again, very similar. They have updated their website. I believe it will be an ongoing work in progress as all websites are.
Yeah, but for that particular question, that part is done and has been completed. That if someone wants to file a complaint, that is up and running now.
The next question is one we will need to defer back to the town and to the website. How soon will a process to more accurately track and analyze the data be developed as in recommendation 1? I think, Dr. Lee, you've addressed it. There are lots of things that have to be factored in. I don't know if we can't provide a timeline. I don't know if there's any other considerations that you want to just address briefly.
Yeah.
Okay. The next question had to do, besides the Community Advisory Board, a Community Oversight Committee is also needed. How soon will it be established and what will the process be? Again, this is one we would defer back to the town. And I do believe you've addressed it. We had a number of very similar questions. Okay. And the remaining questions, again, were just about how to determine sufficient training. So that concludes the questions that we received prior to this meeting. So Don, I think we will turn it back over to you.
Okay. Thank you for going through that. I really appreciate it. I hope hope everyone on Cat TV is able to hear us okay. I know that the audio and video quality varies from person to person. I'm going to put the call-in number up on the screen again. I'm sorry if this is boring for some of you, but this is how you can call in if you would like to ask a question of the IACP folks. This is the dial-in information. I apologize, it's a two-part system, but this is what we've got for now. Dial 1-646-558-8656, and the meeting ID is 868-6046-6981, and you'll have to press pound a couple times. Then you'll be entered into the meeting waiting room, where we have some folks now, and we will enter you. Thank you for your patience. We'll enter you into the meeting shortly. So again, 646-558-8656, meeting ID 868-6046-6981. So I'm going to ask IACP if there's anything else you'd like to say about this process before we open up the callers. I know that this is not the meeting you wanted to give us. You wanted to come and do this in person and have it be something that we all could do together. And no Zoom meeting can ever be as personal or as useful as getting together in a room. But given that this is what we've got, I would like to give you an opportunity to just, if there's anything else you'd like to say before we move into calls. And select board members, I'm going to remind you that we will have access to IACP later on during the summer. So if we don't get to asking our questions tonight, I have a stack of them. I'm sure you all have a stack of them. If we don't get to answering our questions tonight, we will have future opportunities to do that. Tonight is really about letting the public, the folks from Bennington, call in and get their questions answered to the greatest extent possible. So IACP, any other thoughts? Carl, Jesse, Megan, anything else you want to say before I open up the calls?
Sure, I'd like to, if I could, just reiterate the conclusion from the original presentation we had, and that is that the foundation does exist for the Bennington Police Department to be successful and developing operational strategies that encompass and embody the elements of community policing, as well as procedural justice, and incorporating better decision making in their actions with the public. So while this parts of this report may seem critical, they're intended to be critical in a constructive way to help the police department move forward to better serve the community. And we think they're well placed to be able to do that to move forward.
Good to hear. Anything else? No? Okay. Well, I'm going to admit the first caller in just a minute. Before I do, I'd just like to say that we will expect our usual kind of ground rules here. We will ask all callers to remain civil in their conversation. Keep your comments brief, please. There's a lot of information we'd like to get through tonight, and these would be questions again for IACP. If you ask questions about the select board, we'll jot them down, but we're going to have our process later this summer. So I guarantee you that we will take this up thoroughly and we will take it up swiftly, and that there will be significant follow through on all of this. So we're not going to focus on the select board tonight. We're going to focus on IACP. So that's the first thing. Civility, please. As chair, I won't tolerate any personal attacks of any type. No hate speech, no threats, and let's have your best selves here. So when you come in, I'm going to ask you to please give us your name and your town of residence. If you can do it clearly, please, so the secretary, Nancy Lively, who's on with us, can write it down in the minutes, that would be great. So I'm going to admit the first caller here, ending in 836. And caller, you are in the Bennington Select Board meeting with the IACP. Please give us your name and tell us your town of residence, and give us your question. I'm going to unmute you. Sorry. Try this again. Are you there, caller?
Yep.
Please give us your name and tell us your town of residence, and give us your question.
My name's Mia Schultz. I am in Bennington.
I'm going to unmute you.
Oh,
Mia, thank you very much for joining us tonight. This will work a little better if you can mute your television just briefly while, or your radio while we're talking.
done.
There'll be less feedback.
It's done.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So my interpretation of this report is that there's lacking data collection. They were lacking, basically breaking the law by not implementing Act 56. Is that normal for police departments to do in your experience? And if not, why wouldn't you recommend personnel change, especially from leadership?
Okay, Mia, would you like to stay on the line, or shall I turn this question over to them?
I'd like to stay on the line.
Okay, keep you on the line for a little bit. I'm going to mute you for just a minute, Mia, because of the sound quality. We'll let IACP field this question.
Okay.
Okay, our task for this particular project was to look at policies and procedures. We were not there to investigate any personnel issues, but to look at policies as it was related to making sure that they were either followed, if they weren't followed, to look at the policies for better recommendations. Once those recommendations are made on policy enhancement, it would actually take care of personnel issues or give them the ability to address those things through policies. But that was not our task to look at personnel issues, personnel records or files, or any criminal or potential criminal complaints. I hope that answered your question.
Mia, I've unmuted you. Does that more or less get at what you're asking?
Well, not really, because if the same personnel is actually implementing the change, then how does that take care of the personnel issues, especially especially in reference to leadership who has failed egregiously to implement the Act 56 and collect data that's needed to be able to have these conversations regarding their stops. So to say that personnel will figure it out once they change these policies, it's hard for me to like grasp that, because leadership itself will be the ones to implement that. So it won't take care of itself. So I like explanation.
Okay, when you have a policy and that policy is well defined and the process is there, everybody has a boss. Even the police department has leadership over them as well. So they can only enforce the policies that are in place. So if there was a lack in policy, we gave them the recommendations to tighten that up, and therefore there's a process, just like anything else. The policy doesn't just stop there. The policy goes up, even through legal aspects. Everything has to follow the guidelines of policy. So if the policy outlines a process, and it can be litigated. So there is a way that the policy will take place and will be adhered to. It just has to go up the chain, wherever that chain may go, and will continue up to either the town select or wherever. The policy needs to be tight, and it needs to be providing direction. Even for those leaders overseeing the police department, they needed a well-defined policy so that they can carry out their jobs in their position as well.
And Dr. Lee, if I understood her right, she also asked about data collection. The report seems to state that the police department is collecting all the data required by the state at this point, but there could be additional data collected at some point in the future. Is that right?
Well, the data collection issue that we came across while we were doing our study, and speaking with the police department since then, they have made the corrections. They found the gaps and where their problem was. One of it was lack of training and knowledge, and also shortage of manpower. So they found that gap, and therefore they now are stating that they are actually capturing the data that is required by the state. Again, this could be verified and tested 6 months, 12 months, and a year down the line. But they stated that they did identify the issue, they have addressed the issue, and now they're making the modification. Data collection will take about a year or two to be able to catch up, but you can start to test that data 6 months out, 12 months out, and actually have a verification through the state, and then go back to the department and verify the data that they're collecting. No different than what we did. You'll be able to go back, verify the data collection. You can tell by the number of car stops, the number of arrests, the number of complaints. And with the new reporting system going to the website, you'll be able to come back, pull those numbers. So now there are more mechanisms for you to come back and to verify what's being reported and what's not being reported.
Thank you, Mia. I have unmuted you again.
I'm good. We can go to the next caller.
Okay, I apologize for muting and unmuting. It's just that the sound quality jumps back and forth. But thank you for your call. Listen, we'll be at this all summer, and we hope you'll continue to participate as we go.
Definitely.
Okay, thank you. So I'm about to admit the second caller here. Good evening, caller. I am welcoming you to the Bennington Select Board meeting, and I'd ask you if you would please state your name and your town of residence for us.
Yes, hi, this is Tom D., CEO of Southwestern Run Healthcare, and I reside in Bennington.
Good evening. Thank you for calling in.
Thank you. So certainly my comments will be brief, but just by way of background and perspective for the group and the audience, I'm the CEO of Southwestern Run Healthcare. I've been at our system now as a leader for the last on my 11th year. My healthcare, just by way of background perspective, my healthcare career spans a little over 40 years, and I've been at actually 6 hospitals and our health systems throughout the Northeast, both larger and smaller than SVHC. They've been urban, suburban, and rural facilities. And I've, during my 40 years, I've actually been the CEO for 29 of those years. each healthcare organization I've been associated with has had a unique relationship with law enforcement agencies, especially the local police departments. And I would say that I've experienced relations that range from outstanding to poor. The critical nature of working relationship between healthcare systems and police departments are certainly intertwined. Both their vital safety net services. We deal with life and death situations daily. We're both 24/7 organizations that deal with extreme stress around the clock. And we have many professionals in our workforce who are, I would say overworked, underpaid, and at times underappreciated for how difficult their job is. But I have to say, I have never experienced such a positive and professional and collaborative relationship as I've had during my tenure here with the Bennington Police Departments. From my perspective, and I should say from the perspective of many of our leadership people, and we employ over 1,500 people in our organization, and as well as our rank and file employees, the Bennington Police Department in many ways sets the standards for excellence. They're an outstanding partner on many, many initiatives. They support our staff and our patients. They're responsible in a timely manner. They provide on-site service for us. They provide educational programs. They participate in our drills. And they really protect around the clock our staff and our patients. I had to give a special shout out to Chief Doucette and for his leadership team. Paul's style of communication, collaboration, professionalism, and can-do approach is truly remarkable and outstanding. And every organization has room for improvement, and so does the police department as well as our health system and all of us. But I think indeed our community is indeed blessed to have the police department as it's currently structured here. I've never encountered someone like Paul and his leadership style, and I just have to give, and I think the police department in many ways reflects his style and approach. I was disappointed that I was not able to interview with the consulting team that came around because I wanted to have a chance to speak with them firsthand. And for some reason, that schedule never happened. But I appreciate the opportunity to say a few words tonight about the police department here. And again, I know I speak on behalf of many people in our organization when I say we are totally supportive of the efforts that the police department has done in Bennington. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Tom. We are all feeling especially grateful to the whole medical system that we have here in town, particularly right now. The competence and whatnot that we see up there has been very, very good.
Well, thank you, Tom.
We're glad to have you here. Did you have any questions that you wanted to ask IACP while you're on the line, or are you all set?
No, I think I'm all set, Don.
Okay. Thank you for joining us. Have a good evening.
All right. Thank you now. Bye-bye.
So we are going to admit the next caller here. And caller, you are in the Bennington Select Board meeting. You're muted right now, but I'll unmute you just a minute. Welcome. And please give us your name and tell us your town of residence, please.
We are all feeling especially grateful to the whole medical system that we have here in town. Particularly right now, the competence in
caller. This is the select board. We have you in the call at this point.
Thank you. Did you have any questions that you wanted to ask IACP while you're on the line?
Phone number ending in 311.
I think I'm set. Go on.
Yes, it's Mary Garish.
Good evening. Welcome. We've got you now. Mary, it would be very helpful if you turn the TV down just for a second, and we'll.
The next caller here, and
we'll take your call.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Mary. Thank you.
Thank you. It's Mary Garish. I live here in Bennington, and I would like to ask a question. And I think that the question may actually demonstrate the difference between public perception and some of the other remarks we've recently heard. So one of the things that you mentioned, Dr. Lee, was that you think that things have greatly improved in terms of the, quote, warrior mentality since the report came out because of the website. And I would like to just mention that there are very many people, the website does look a lot nicer, I agree, but there are very many people who don't see the website, and particularly the actions of the police to community members has nothing to do with the website. So I would like to ask why you think, why you think that just the improvement of the website indicates that there's an improvement in terms of community policing and people feeling protected instead of discriminated against or that sort of thing. And we're talking mostly about people that are marginalized, either in terms of their economic status or in terms of their ethnicity. So that's the first question. And the second question is, don't you think that when you recommend something and then you come in front of the public and say, oh, things have greatly changed, shouldn't we get a supplementary report showing how things have changed rather than just saying their website is better? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your question. Thank you for your question. First of all, when I was talking about the website, I was talking about the website, and I was talking about the changes of being able to have the opportunity to submit or file a complaint. The biggest complaint we had there was that there was no way of filing a complaint. That process is there now. So if you have a complaint against an officer, and most people had a fear factor of being able to file a complaint against an officer. Well, they made that available for you to do. That's what I meant by that's been a major improvement. Never mentioned anything about community policing being improved because that's something that goes over time. So I'm sorry if it was misconceived that you thought I was talking about the community policing aspect. Two different issues, two different concerns. The one thing that I wanted to make point is that when you went to the website, and you're right, a lot of people don't go to the website, but it provided them an avenue that it gave them comfort that if they were afraid to face someone or had fear, it gave them an outlet where they could still file a complaint or a process. And for those who don't have the ability to get to the police department and have something positive to say, they can say it there. It allows for them to gauge what direction the department gives. It gives you feedback for the department to review the website information on a daily basis. As I stated, that data-driven will allow them to police better. It will allow the community to hold the police department to a higher accountability. I also stated that if they collect data, there's ways to verify the data, either now, 6 months, or a year down the line. So it allows for more accountability because the data is the data. And it will tell you whether the complaints are increasing or decreasing. And it also allows you to go to the state because they report the data to the state. So it gives you another depository to go look at. You don't have to just go to Bennington Police Department to get the data. You can go to the state. So data collection will allow for those things to happen. As far as when it talks about the community policing, what I stated was that it will allow them to deploy their resources a lot better. So that way they have time to spend in community engaged activities. If they develop a community liaison officer, that will allow them to develop better programs and better communication between the community. They don't have to deal directly with the police chief. They'll have their own community policing liaison that they can make sure that their message gets through to whomever it needs to get through, and then they can hold that person accountable to get the information back to them. So I hope that answers your question in reference to the website. The website is a plus to allow you to make complaints or give compliments. The data collection process allows you to be able to report back on the police department. The community policing part will come and take effect based on the fact that once you establish those other recommendations, that will help enhance the police department. I hope that answered your question.
So Mary, I am going to, you're still in with the call and I'm going to admit you in just a minute, but for everybody else's sake, I'm going to put the numbers back up on the screen. These are the call-in numbers. There are a couple people in the waiting room. I apologize for the wait, but this is the way that you get in. You dial the 1-646-558-8656, meeting ID 868-6046-6981, and press pound when prompted. There's a little bit of a lag on the line, and so if you happen to be watching the TV, you're about 10 seconds behind where we are, and that's partly what makes this difficult. So Mary, I'm going to take you off mute at this point and see if you have further questions for IACP.
Thank you. I do have a follow-up question, Dr. Lee, and thank you for answering my other question. So I understand the concept of a police liaison, but my assumption is that a police liaison is going to be somebody who's already on the police force. And the real problem here seems to be community trust in the police force or in the culture of the police force as it comes down through the ranks. So don't you feel that it would be more important or equally as important to develop the Civilian Advisory Committee to work with the police liaison? I think you saw that when you were here in town, frequently at public meetings, you did not get a lot of people coming to share their stories. Why? Because they're afraid. And that's just the way it is. And so if they're talking to a police officer, whether it's a liaison or not, I think that some of that fear would still be there. If they have a citizens, whatever you want to call it, committee in sync with them and the liaison, I think that the comfort level would be better, and that might lend itself better to a transition to community policing, because I can remember the police that walked the beat when I was a little girl in the cities of Detroit. And if I needed help, I would go to them, and I didn't have to worry about them taking me to jail for it. I knew they were going to help me, and that's what we need here. So don't you think that the civilian committee is a really important step to establishing that kind of relationship?
Well, I agree. That was one of our recommendations. And again, the process is twofold. You need a liaison officer to work with the community. So you don't want to wait, because it's going to be a process to, one, come up with a selection process to get the community liaison group together, the committee together. So you have to start somewhere. It's a process. But everything you stated was actually recommended in the report. So you're absolutely right. It will add a plus to the overall community trust. One person, one group, one business, one part of town at a time. More importantly is we have to start somewhere. The liaison officer, that's a select process that can be done within the police department. The community advisory board, getting individuals to volunteer their time, to come up with the schedule, events, procedures, and how they're going to operate. It's going to take a little bit more time, and that will come from the community and the board here, board select, to determine how that's going to look at. So my thing is, and my recommendation is, everything you stated, I concur with, but it's going to take time, and the time goes back to the police department, the board, and the community to work that out.
Mary, I've got you on mute, but I'm giving you the 10-second warning here, and I'm going to take you off mute here and give you a chance to just tell us if that has answered your question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. I appreciate your answers and your interest in our town.
Absolutely.
You can go on to the next person.
We're not going away. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you
for your call. So I'm going to admit the next caller here. Caller, welcome. You're in the Bennington Select Board meeting at this point. In just a minute, I'll unmute you, and we'll be able to hear you, and you'll be able to continue to hear us. Please give us your name slowly, so our secretary can copy it down, and tell us your town of residence. Thank you very much. Here you go. I'll unmute you, and we'll be able to hear you, and you'll be able to continue. Caller ending in 566. We have you in the meeting at this point. Slowly, so our secretary can copy it down and tell us your town of residence. Thank you very much. Here you go.
Hello.
Good evening.
Can you?
You're on the you're on TV.
Okay, my name is Leslie Jacobson. I live in North Bennington, and I would first. Hello.
Leslie, we are here, but it would be very helpful if you take just a second to turn your TV off. Then we won't get.
I don't have a TV on. I have nothing on.
That's across the way. So
Okay, we hear something in the background, but go ahead and keep going. We'll stay with you here.
Okay. I hear all the background noise myself, but I hear it on the computer. Let me turn off my computer. Okay. Maybe now this is better.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much. We can hear you clearly.
I would first like to acknowledge the good work that went into the IACP report, and I sincerely hope that the residents of Bennington will actually read this important document. In the report, it talks about a heavy emphasis on warrior thinking within our police department. There are many in our community that do not feel they're receiving equal treatment from the law. I would like to know how specifically, other than updating the website, will this warrior thinking mentality be addressed? I would like to know how specifically, other than updating the website, will this warrior thinking mentality be?
Are we still hearing voices?
Sorry about that. I have muted the caller at this point just for the phone line quality, and I'm going to go ahead and say IACP. If you'd like to respond to that, that'd be great.
Well, when we talked about the warrior mentality, it's more about a tactical approach versus a community policing approach. The community policing approach, it has to do what you wear, how you present yourself, how you carry yourself. The website was one part, just a small part of that. When you go there and everybody sees tactical gear, wear, and everything else, that was one part. The same thing, how you approach individuals in tactical gear. When we look at the calls for service, the number of violent calls for service, Bennington's a very peaceful town, walkable town. I enjoyed it. So when you're there, the type of uniform gives it a different feel. So how we present ourselves and how we represent ourselves, what we wear, it's not about even how we act internally. It's sometimes the presence of just how we wear and makes ourselves either approachable or non-approachable. So a lot of times that we can take that away and engage individuals, walk up to individuals. I can wear a bulletproof vest I can wear underneath my shirt versus external my shirt. So that all plays a part on how I'm interacting with my community. So when I'm walking there, I'm talking to a young child or I'm talking to an adult or anyone, a homeless person on the street. And I've seen officers in Bennington actually reach out to some of those individuals with disadvantage. Some of them can do it very well, others who do not. Some think that they're not social workers, but that's not just Bennington. It goes across the country where police officers are now asked to do things that they previously did not do. But when your calls for service are so heavy on dealing with situations that require a more of a social work response, then that's where we need to train towards to be able to handle this response. So if I'm dealing with mental health issues, I need to train the belt to handle that process. I need to come with a more softer approach. I'm looking for a de-escalation. If that person is violent in their behavior, violent in their action, I need to have the training to bring them down to the best point without as minimal amount of force as possible. And if I can do that by talking them down, and that takes training, it takes time, it takes development, but it also is a passion. Do we do this? How do we do this? It's also how do we recruit new hirees? That we want to make sure that we recruit with a mentality that's service oriented, that we're there to serve. And that's the part what I was talking about. How do we change this? We change it through training. We need to train more interdepartmental training, cross training. All that helps decentralize our behaviors. The more that we work with communities, hospitals, educators, everything else, we start to change. Working with the students, working with individuals with ADA, our other mental disabilities, or intellectual disabilities, and things like that. The more we learn, every day we learn, and we start to interact with these individuals. Mental illness and mental health are two different things, and we try to like separate them. Not everybody that has a mental health is going to be violent. And I think sometimes we take that into a situation that every time we're going to a mental health situation, we have to go in force. And actually we're escalating things instead of de-escalating. So learning how, if we're making the same calls over and over and over again, let's think about trying a different approach instead of going the same way we've been going. So that starts the process of taking away that warrior mentality and the perception of it that starts to build upon we are here, we're part of the community, we live in the community. At the end of the day, we are the community. And I think once that is felt between the community and the police, and I think that mentality will start to be, the perception will start to dwindle. I hope that answered your question.
Leslie, I've muted you for sound quality, but I'm going to unmute you here and ask you if you have any follow-up questions for Dr. Lee. Go ahead, Ms. Jacobson, if you're still there. I've muted you for sound quality, but I'm going to unmute you here and ask you if you have any follow-up. I'm so sorry that this is so difficult, but it's just very choppy. Go ahead.
What Dr. Lee just described sounds exactly what Dr. Lee, can you hear me?
Yeah, it's just a delay.
What Dr. Lee just described sounds exactly like what our police force needs in terms of training. I would just like to describe sounds exactly what Dr. Lee, can you hear me?
Yeah, it's just a delay.
What Dr. Lee just described sounds exactly like what our police force needs in terms of training. I would just like to know that that kind of training will actually take place in our police department.
Okay, so Dr. Lee, were you able to hear that? Most part?
I keep hearing a lot of like I'll hear your voice from what you said about 2 minutes ago.
Donald,
Okay.
could I interrupt? I'm sorry. Mike here from Cat TV. If any callers are calling in, please mute any device you're watching this meeting on. It's causing the feedback that we're hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, and I apologize to that last caller for how difficult this is. Listen, this is not an easy way for us to communicate, and I'm so grateful to the people who are making the effort to even try to call in. It's great that you care about the community, you care about this issue, and you're trying. I'm sorry, we'll try to make it easier. Okay, so we're gonna invite the next caller in. Caller, we've entered you into the Bennington Select Board meeting. In just a minute, I'll unmute you and we'll give you a chance to ask IACP your questions. If you'd start, please, by giving us your name slowly so the secretary can record it, and your town of residence, please.
Hello?
We have you.
Hello?
Good evening. Welcome.
How you doing?
Good, thanks. If possible, would you please turn off the audio sound on either your computer or whatever the background noise is coming from? We'll be able to hear you a lot better if you do.
Okay, good.
Great, perfect. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, am I on?
You're on, and you sound great.
Okay. I have a question. Can anybody hear me? Because I can't really hear
Yes.
if anybody hears, like I'm talking to myself. So I'll just keep going.
We can hear you.
Okay, good. My name is Sean Pratt. I live in the community in Bennington. This is a question that's not directed towards anyone, because I really don't have anything to say to the IACP people because they came in and did their assessment, right? So now my thing is the conflict of interest here that I'm seeing, right? Now let me go through this. It says if there's a question of unprofessional conduct, misconduct, in this situation, biased policing, right? It is to go to what's called the Criminal Justice Training Council, right? So once it goes to the Criminal Justice Training Council, then they would recommend what they would do next, right? So now the problem I'm having is I'm hearing that Rick Guthier is running the Criminal Justice Training Council. Now, if that's the case, and Chief Doucette is the police chief, then that's the same. That is kind of like two wings of the same bird, right? So just like the other people said earlier, just like Mary said earlier, how are we going to be able to fix these problems, okay, if we keep running into a situation where, everybody is conflict of interest everywhere, right? Because I'm pretty sure Rick Guthier already heard about this information, okay? All right? So why did it have to take so long for all of us to push this to have these people on there when we already know that there was a mistrust within the community? This doctor that was talking earlier, I don't know who he's talking about because that's a demographic of people that the police protects him and the people he deals with, but not the people in my community. And that doctor is the people in my community is who he has to see. And this is how he sees things. My thing is, it's a lot of conflict of interest. So to everyone, how are we going to be able to, right? The thing was, how are we going to be able to trust the police department? Rick Guthier retired, okay? And I felt like this was handed down to Chief Doucette, okay? It was handed down to him. So they're all a part of the same entities. So how are we going to fix this? They're not going to do it by themselves. So what I'm saying is, when I'm saying this to all the people out there, we need to just do our own thing in terms of get our own policing committee and not even worry about all these other people and all these other things. That's just my take on it. I don't know if anyone wants to answer what I'm saying, but what I'm seeing right here is a lot of bureaucracy. And what I'm seeing is a lot of pandering. You guys are handling this with white gloves, and then there's people suffering on these streets, okay? And in these places, all right? Now, I just want a clear answer. This is it. We want a clear answer, all right? Because we're not trusting the people, all right? And a lot of the people on the select board needs to go, okay? We need to really figure out what this problem is because this is just not going to this is just not going to go away. I know Bennington and people want this to go away, but it's not going to go away. That's all. Sorry, guys.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any IACP folks? Would you like to respond to that at all, or should we just leave that as Mr. Pratt's statement?
I think he was making more of a statement than a question. Like anything else in any other change, doing anything independently will never be successful. I understand his frustration But at the same time, that if you want anything done, you have to work collectively as a group. I think with, try to get on that community advisory board. Try to be there where they're doing policies and procedures. I mean, the only way to make changes is you got to get involved. And I think everyone that's calling in is passionate. They're taking time out of their day, and everybody's passionate, and they have a right to be. But how that process takes, you have to be engaged and involved. I had a chance to meet a lot of these individuals, and again, they have an opportunity to express their voice and opinions, and we have to listen, and we need to be able to provide them an avenue to be able to address these issues and concerns. So whatever that looks like, I think everybody needs to sit down at the table, come up with a plan that's going to address the needs of those individuals who do not feel like they're represented, and find a way that what it looks like, that's between the town, the police department, and the community that feels underrepresented. But it needs to be heard, listened to, and just not put on the back burner. But we need to make everyone feel that their say is being valued, no matter who it is.
Sean, I'm not sure if you're still on. It looks like you are, and I'm not sure if you were able to hear that very clearly, but if you are on and you have any further questions, go ahead and say them.
No, do you have me on still? No, I mean, I heard that. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, and you're
Yes.
on the air still. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I did hear that. But the problem is, I think, is the community is afraid to get involved, right? Because there's only a few people, right? So I think that's the problem, right? Because they feel like that the whole process is not real to them. And I think that's the thing that we have to fix. Well, somebody has to fix, because, we can't keep going on like this the way we're going as it currently stands. And like I said, no matter how it goes, we're not trying to do anything by ourselves, but at some point, we're going to have to, some of us are going to have to come together and figure out how do we combat this, because the safety of our children, the safety of the people that we are around every day, and the people that we love, and under the circumstances that we're under, especially under this COVID situation, is getting really dire out here. And we need people, we need the select board, right? And to be honest, that needs to change. We need people to be able to understand where these people are coming from, okay? Understand that these discriminatory practices are happening to people of color, okay? To all marginalized people, to gay, lesbian, and bi people, right? So let's just try our best, right, to understand and let us all speak together and make sure that our children are safe and the people we love are safe. And I'm done, y'all.
Okay, thank you. Well said. Feel like I need to pause just a minute. I'm going to put the call-in number up again. I know this is very tedious for some of you, but it is a very difficult situation to call in here. So if you do have something on your mind and you want to call in, this is how people are doing it. You dial the first number, 646-558-8656, and then when prompted, you enter the meeting ID, 868-6046-6981, and press pound when prompted. I also feel like I just need to take a brief pause to say that the wheels of progress are slow on this. I'm sorry for that. This board is very committed to seeing this change happen. We are working on it. It means a tremendous amount to me personally, and I believe to everybody on this board. We don't have the skills to change this on our own, so we sought IACP's help to help us get there. And I believe we ended up selecting IACP's proposal because we have been told by everybody we talked to about it that you guys are probably the best folks in the country to do this, and the fact that you were a nonprofit, not just a bunch of old police officers making a buck, really worked well for us. So again, to the community, I'd say I'm sorry this is taking so long. It is really important work. It's a process. It's not a checklist. We are going to keep working on this, and I'm sorry that Mr. Pratt feels that we all need to be replaced. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. But either way, we're going to work on this summer, and we're going to work on it as quickly as we can. So I'm going to enter the next caller here. And before I do, I think it will go easier if we, if I say to the caller whose number ends in 573, if you would please turn off any audio devices you have, we'll enter you into the meeting now and ask you to, when I unmute you, I'll ask you to please give us your name and tell us what town you live in, and accept my apologies in advance for the fact that this is such a clunky way to communicate. But I'm unmuting you now, and please give us your name and your residence. So I'm going to enter the next caller here.
Yeah, my name, I can't turn off.
I think it will go easier if we, if I say to the...
Yep, my name is Rachel Blumenthal.
Good evening, Rachel. Thanks for calling in. I'm sorry it's so difficult, but we appreciate you staying on hold for so long. Go ahead, Rachel.
Okay, I have a question for Dr. Lee, and kind of a comment, input, combination of that. As a victim of the warrior mode of operation during a local traffic stop, I appreciate the information in the report which addressed the roles of warrior versus guardian. To me, the emphasis on these roles is tied to the mission and vision statement. And a mission and vision statement that it sounds like it's being recommended that all be readdressed, can address some of that, the balance of those roles. But I want to emphasize that takes a significant shift in attitude and action, and that this work is really hard and challenging, and takes a significant amount of self-reflection. And so I guess my question to you is, and I'm not sure you're going to be able to answer it, but my question would be, do you think this force is genuinely interested in doing this kind of work that really takes a lot of self-reflection and looking at some hard issues? So that's my first part of the question.
Okay, Rachel, I'm going to mute you just for a second so that the sound quality is better, but after IACP has a chance to answer, I'll unmute you again if you have a follow-up question, okay?
Okay, yep.
Thanks.
All right.
Go ahead, Dr. Lee.
To answer your question, having the opportunity to meet with a lot of the officers there and supervisors and management, those officers are passionate about what they do. They're not there just collecting a paycheck. I just think that the training and the direction, and a lot of times when we get hired for certain jobs, how we're hired for that job, it says a lot. So maybe the process of training, looking at how we hire, who we hire, will play a role. Performance evaluations will also begin to change. When some agencies were really heavy, and I'll use some organizations like state police that are very heavily traffic enforcement, they started to change their dynamics on how they rated individuals in their performance based on, we're going to reduce the number of accidents versus the number of tickets we write. The objectivity is to make sure that people travel from A to B in a safe mode of transportation without getting involved in accidents or anything else. So changing the performance evaluation process on how officers do their job and how they're rewarded and how they're going to get promoted. Because everybody's looking to advance in their career, get promoted, but how we reward those individuals based on de-escalation, based on community service, and put more emphasis on those types of things will change behavior. As long as we tie it to policies, performance evaluations, and appraisals. That's how you start to change. As far as the officers themselves, every last one was committed to doing their job. Every last one was committed to coming to work to do their job. Now it just provides the direction in which we want them to do their job and give them the resources to help do their job. And that means if there's additional training necessary to meet the town needs, the community needs, and to stay focused, a lot of that's data driven. If the officers on the street doesn't really know the perceptions of the community, that survey we did should not be heartbroken, but it should be, I want to know. I want to know what they think about me so that I can make the necessary changes within myself. If we never know, then we go on and do business as we usually do. So when we do the report, it's not to beat people down or hurt anyone, but it's to give them the information that they didn't really have in front of them that they can actually utilize to apply to make change. So now they have this information. Now they can start to work through the process, training, retraining, look at policies, look at procedures, and look at appraisal processes. This will start the process of helping to develop that mentality that you might have faced one time or another, but this is how it changes. And you, as a community person, having an honest, open conversation with an officer when you get a chance to share your feelings and emotions will make a difference. And get away from the fear. If we walk around in fear, nothing's going to change. No one's going to attack you. And if somebody says something to hurt your feelings, we need to have a little bit stronger shoulders. And if you believe and you really value what you're saying, then speak it. It's your truth. And they eventually will listen, one person at a time. You're not going to change everybody overnight, but one person at a time, you'll eventually get there.
Rachel, I have unmuted you again. I don't know if you're still with us, but if that partially addressed your question, do you have a follow-up?
I do have a follow-up. I got cut off part of what Dr. Lee said at the end there, but I just want to make a comment both for Dr. Lee as well as for the select board in terms of training. So I'm an educator in our local SU. I have done a significant amount of training in the area of trauma, and I think that is a huge piece that is missing. We're talking about implicit bias, which is excellent training, mental health training, but the whole piece around trauma needs to really be addressed, because that to me is so key in what's happening as soon as you have an interaction with the police force. I would also suggest that in terms of looking at organizations and change, that we really know that change happens either small steps or faster steps, but really is so made possible by the leadership, and that what we really need is strong leadership that really understands this vision and about where we're going. And again, that's a question for me, given the report and all the information in there. Does the leadership, on our select board, with the chief of police, understand that vision? Because it's hard to be the administrator of a program like that without knowing really where you're headed. So thank you for taking the time for letting me speak. You can go move on to the next person.
Okay, thank you very much for your call. Yeah, have a good evening. So we have another caller going. I'm sorry that I am a little bit distracted as I try to keep track of both the flow of calls here and the conversation, and apologize if I'm not keeping up on just everything, but I'm going to admit the next caller here, and just remind you, caller, that you're in the Bennington Select Board meeting, and if I can, I'd get you to mute any electronic devices you have going on in the background, and then please give us your name and your town of residence, and welcome to the call. I'm unmuting you now. Apologize if I'm not keeping up on everything, but good evening, caller. You are on the Bennington Select Board meeting now.
Hi, my name is Lynn Mazza. I'm a Bennington resident. My question goes back to the whole change that was put on the website about where people can come with complaints against the police force. And my question is, is it normal, like throughout the rest of the country, other cities and towns, that people would file a complaint to the very people who they feel are abusing them? And then why would they, if they felt that they had been abused or misused somehow, when they filed that report, why would they have any reason to believe anything happened to that report other than it was thrown into the recycle bin? It just seems to me that kind of filing a complaint to the very people who would need to investigate themselves seems like such circular logic. And I'm wondering if other cities and towns have some kind of independent entity that that can accept these kind of complaints and really research them in a a non-biased way. It kind of goes to that question of conflict of interest.
Okay, thank you, caller. I'm going to mute you just for a second, but after we give IACP a chance to respond, I'll unmute you and see if you have a follow-up, okay? Go ahead, Dr. Lee.
Yeah, again, when we talk about community advisory boards or oversight boards, they're organizations that are put in place would review complaints separate from the police department. They would work along with them, but individuals would file those complaints with that civilian review board or civilian oversight board. They review policies, or should I say complaints, that might be made against police officers. They would work with the town select board or whatever and HR. And then they have different various powers throughout the country. Some have subpoena power, some do not. So that really goes a lot to do with the town, with the city, the police department on what preferences they would agree upon and what type of power they would give that particular entity. So yes, they do have something that can provide some oversight, some with full oversight, some with subpoena power, some with non-subpoena power. And you would have to find out what would work best in your particular community. One shoe doesn't fit all, and you would have to find what possibility would work best for Bennington. And I think that would take a review committee, reaching out to other organizations that may have those oversight committees and see how they work, what glitches they had, how they worked them out, and how that process is working out for them now. So I think that would be the best way to answer your question, that it would take research to find out what would work best for Bennington.
Ms. Mazza, I have unmuted you. I'm not sure if you were able to hear that response, but do you have a follow-up that you'd like to put?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I was listening to his response. I apologize. Yeah, my follow-up would be, what's the recommendation? I mean, specifically, would you recommend a kind of citizens oversight board that would have subpoena power? Would you recommend one that kind of had less teeth to it? What do you think, given what you've seen in other cities in the country, specifically, what kind of model would work for us?
And again, that would really be hard to say because I've seen both models work. And it depends on how the community is going to engage, if you have the right people that are willing to sit on, because you need to have someone with at least an understanding of police operations. You're going to need to have someone with some type of legal background. You're going to have someone with an HR background that understands those type of centric things. So if you're going to have subpoena power, you're going to really have a lot more knowledgeable committee group. Now, if you're going to deal with the general public, citizens, then I would look for those to not have subpoena power, but those who can build that collaboration and cooperation. Both can work. It depends on what type of resources you're going to have as far as the population to serve on either one of those particular committees will make all the difference in the world. If you have one that will do subpoena power and nobody to fulfill those positions, then it really means nothing at all. So again, it really depends on the population there in Bennington. And as you explore those, you try to explore every option that's out there and then find out which one works best for Bennington.
Ms. Mazza, I'm not sure if we're going to still have you on the line here, but
yes, thank you very much for your time tonight. My question's been answered.
okay. Thank you for calling in. I apologize for how difficult it is, but you've done a great job with it.
So have a good night.
Okay, thank you. So we are looking at the next caller here. And caller, I've just admitted you into the Bennington Select Board meeting, and you're muted at this point, but I would ask you at this point to please turn off any audio devices that you have going in the background. And just a second, when I unmute you, if you would please give us your name and your town of residence. Okay, here we go. Caller, welcome to the meeting.
Hi, Don. How you doing? It's Mike Bethel.
Good evening, Mike.
How you doing? You know, I'm probably going to feel like a skunk at the picnic, but I have to stick up for the police department. I've lived here on and off all my life. I came back about 20-something years ago. And whether you had the police chief, Rick Gauthier, or you have Paul Doucette, I've never found any one of the police department crew, officers, or Paul Doucette, or Rick Gauthier, ever be disrespectful to anybody that I've ever seen them pull over, talk to. I've had to call them on a few occasions for things. And I think they're getting a bum rap. Now, in saying that, it doesn't mean that everything can't have a second look and improvements made. But these folks that go out and protect us are citizens. They got rights of their own. They got lives of their own. They got families of their own. And in Vermont, you will also must understand, and I'm not for any stricter gun laws, but everyone has a right to have a gun virtually on them at any time. So they don't know when they go out who they're going to run into, if it's somebody local or if it's a stranger. And I just think it's time to not overly beat up our police department. That's number one. Number two, our select board and Stu Hurd, we've had many disagreements over the years. Never have I found them not to take an issue serious if somebody brings it to the board, whether it's the police department or any other public employee. They take it serious and they find out what's going on. You know, we only have 15,000 in this community, and most of us seem to all know each other. So I just want to ask everybody to chill out a little bit. And in this time with the virus and all the other things, we had 9/11 many years ago. It's time to be thankful for what we got and not what we haven't got. And if they wanted to try the select board, an ombudsman type situation for a year, somebody appointed, small fee or no fee, that people could bring their issues to, then bring them to the board, to Stu Hurd, that might be a little bit of a panacea for this. But I really do want to thank the police department and Paul Doucette and Rick Gauthier before him. And I think they're getting a bum rap. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Do you have any further questions? Do you have a question or anything for IACP while you're on the line?
No, it's just hard to understand the gentleman that's speaking. I don't know if it's his style of speaking or the way it's coming over on this telecast, but it's very hard to really understand it. And I think you ought to maybe hold one of these meetings when you get back to holding regular meetings in public. It is an important issue. And I know Sean Pratt and I know some of the other people that brought this up, and they're great people, but it's time to relax a little bit. And if anybody has a problem, if they bring it to you, Don Campbell, the chair, I know that you will make sure that it gets addressed. And I don't even like you, Don, and I'm saying nice things about you. So
well, Mike, you and I don't agree on much, but I appreciate your call.
We've had our differences, Don, but you're a fair individual, and you take your job very seriously. And you wouldn't put anybody aside if they had a real gripe against the police department or anybody else. So that's all I got to say. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mike, for calling in. But it's worth just acknowledging that this is not a numbers thing. You know, Sean Pratt spoke from the heart, and what he said was I think probably very meaningful for all of us. If there's one person that's feeling that way, it's too many to not explore this. And so we all have to get after this. We know that, and that's part of our process here. I do appreciate hearing from somebody whom I almost never agree with on anything, that there's some appreciation for what the police does from him, but nevertheless, Mr. Pratt's experience is very real, and the people that he talks about, their experience too is something that we need to be very, very attentive to. So I have one more caller at this point, but before I enter that caller, I'm going to put the number up on the screen again, which by now is burned into everybody's mind, no doubt. But if you do have something you want to say, it's 646-558-8656. And the meeting ID is 868-6046-6981. And I apologize that this number changes, not the call-in number, but the meeting ID changes every time we have a meeting, and that makes this all very difficult for people to keep track of, and that's why I keep throwing it up on the screen. So caller, I'm going to enter this caller into the meeting, and caller, you are now in the Bennington Select Board meeting, and I'm going to ask you if you would please to turn off your whatever audio devices you have going on in the background so that we don't have any background noise. And when I unmute you, if you would please give us your name and tell us your town of residence. Thank you very much. You are coming off of mute now. Welcome, caller.
Hi, this is Nancy White. I'm calling from Bennington, and I have two questions. How many survey responses were you expecting to receive? It was heavily publicized. I think you said the time was extended tonight, and yet you only had 404 people in a town of 15,000 that did the survey. How do you explain that only 3% of the people of Bennington participated?
Nancy, I'm going to mute you just for a second while we give IACP a chance to answer that question, and then I'll unmute you for a follow-up question, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And again, it's hard to say why. I mean, we made every effort. We put flyers out. We had the newspaper that was very cooperative that put it out. It went out on television. It was out so many times. We made every effort to make it available. We laid flyers at different businesses throughout the community. As we walked to the community, we met with individuals at focus groups. We provided those individuals with the survey instrument. Some people just did not believe the process was going to be fair, so they chose not to. Again, it wasn't not because of the lack of effort. We made every effort to make it available, even by extending the opportunity to allow them to participate. It wasn't something that we wanted to do quickly, and we really wanted, and we tried to reach out to as many people as possible. This is their community, and we wanted to understand that this is your opportunity to have a say. And we wrote what you spoke. The survey reflected those who took the survey. It wasn't our voice, it was the community's voice. And out of that, it was only 400 or so out of the 15,000. I would have loved to see 15,000 surveys. I would have loved to be able to talk to 1,000 people, but that wasn't the point. But those who did step forward, we appreciate, and we took what they stated, and their voice was heard. We promised to protect their identity. We did that. So we just appreciate everyone who did participate in the process. And for those who had fear, that we hope one day they no longer have that fear. And then when we come back or anyone else decides to do a survey, they will be willing to take that survey and represent Bennington as they should.
Nancy, I'm going to cut in for just a minute here, please. And Nancy White. Nancy Lively, Jeannie Jenkins, periodically her computer just ejects her from a meeting, and I believe it has ejected her again. So she has left the meeting. She may come back in, but right now she has technically left the meeting. Dr. Lee, I'm just going to remind you, if possible, lean right into that mic if you can. It is a little bit hard to hear you, and I heard from Mike Baffle that it was hard to hear. If possible, just speak right up to the extent you can. Nancy, I'm going to unmute you here. Did that get, Nancy White, did that get somewhat at what you were asking? Nancy White, this is Donald Campbell. Are you still with us? Do you have another question for Dr. Lee? So I may have lost.
Hello.
Oh, there she is. Hi, Nancy. Go ahead.
No, I know that the committee and the select board went out of their way to get people to respond. And I think that's why many are concerned in Bennington. If so many had concerns about dealing with the police department, I was just surprised that there was just such a low number of people who took an opportunity to do the survey. My second question, I was very surprised to hear Tom D say that the committee didn't meet with SVHC. This is the one group that deals with practically every citizen in Bennington and every situation imaginable. They have many interactions with the police department and they depend on their support. And I'd like to know why the committee didn't have time to meet with the hospital.
Actually, we did meet with hospital personnel. We met with several people. What we did was we met with everybody that we were given a list to meet, times, schedules, phone numbers, email address. We put the call out to meet with anybody and everyone. We had emails out. We asked the police department to send out a list of people to us to speak to as well. So we spoke to those who we were directed to speak to, and we invited those who weren't notified the opportunity to speak to us. Even after we left Bennington, we stayed readily available. I interviewed people as far as 3 weeks ago that they still wanted to reach out and talk. So availability, we were available to anyone and everyone who wanted to talk to us. So if we didn't speak to someone, it was either because we weren't given their information or they were not given ours, because we had an email that was given to the community, to the city, the town, that if they had any questions or any phone numbers they wanted to reach out to us, they could call us directly, and we would have did everything that we could do to meet them.
Nancy, does that get at your question? If you'd like to ask one more follow-up question, I'll let you do that, and then I think we're going to move on.
Nope, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for calling in. Oh, here comes Jeannie. So Nancy, I believe Nancy Lively, I believe Jeannie Jenkins is back in the meeting. She's
still connecting.
Yes, she's rejoined us. Hey, Jeannie. Your computer timed out again, huh? All right. Well, we're glad to have you back. So it's starting to press 8 o'clock, which is the time that we had hoped to end. I have a kind of stack of questions in front of me, and I'm sure we don't have any other calls right now in the queue. So I have a stack of questions in front of me. I'm sure other board members do about the recommendations, but I guess I'd like to find out, first of all, from AICP, got any evening plans? What's your timing tonight? Would you be willing to go a little longer on this, or should we begin to think about wrapping this up and bringing back have another conversation with the select board questions about these recommendations? What would be the best way to go about this, do you think?
I would say we're available for a little longer this evening. So if there's something, I guess, higher level or more timely to focus on for now, but with the implementation assistance, we can absolutely reconnect at a later date. So I guess short answer, a little bit of both, if that works.
A little bit of both, yeah, okay. Well, board, I have a mixture of kind of specific and broad questions, but and most of them have to do with the recommendations, which which I found pretty exciting, and I think something we should act on soon. But I think we should act on thoroughly. So I'm imagining that at our next meeting we would begin to dig into this stuff right away. But I'd like to make a little bit of space here for board members to ask questions, and I really would like to try to gear this towards interpreting these recommendations as much as possible. So there are a lot of things we could go back and forth on in the report. Not sure that really brings the community forward. I think what I've heard tonight is that people want stuff to happen. They want it to happen now. And I think probably the police department too would like to know what the program is and what our expectations are. So board members, if you would like to, I would ask you to raise your hands if anyone has any question that they'd like to put to IACP. And if I don't see you do that, then I'm going to start down my list. Bruce, did you have your hand up?
I have a more generalized question, partly that I raised when I met with them before, but I'm happy to raise it now if that's helpful. Or you can go with yours. I'm open either way.
I think it would be helpful if you probably know as well as I do what would be helpful at this point. But if you think it would be helpful in our next steps, then do please bring it on.
Okay, so here, Dr. Lee and anybody else who wants to chime in, here's my question. Any number of the recommendations talk about developing policies. I'm looking specifically at recommendation 11, just as an example, develop policies and engage and enhance use of social media to communicate directly with community members, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My question really has to do with the responsibility for developing policies. And what I'm interested in is your perception about best practices in your careers. I know that the police department has to be involved in this. Do you perceive that one of the methodologies for developing policy is to engage community members, to engage members of the police, not just perhaps the chief, but perhaps, line officers and other members of the community and members of the select board for that example, for that matter, in developing policies? That's my question. What's the best practice out there? Is there one?
Dr. Lee, is that something you feel?
Yeah, first of all, what we did do, we did send sample model policies along with the report for them to help give them guidance. This model policy that we send them came from a collective body of experts from around the country that work on policies. Then it goes through a very strong legal review as well. So they have these policies, and the policies are generic enough that can be tailored to that particular department. One of my recommendations is that also having someone with a legal background or legal within the town review these policies as well once they're done. The police department involving the community on use of force policies and arrest policies, community relation policies, communication policies, getting them involved with as much as possible gives about the understanding. It will pick up implicit bias that may be in a policy that we may not see. It might be something that we do every day and not realize there was some implicit bias within that policy. So by having it open to as many people as possible, I think it will allow for a policy that will be more inclusive, not only to serve the police department, but the community will understand the why. So I think those were some of the things that you can look at. And training, having individuals train in how to develop good policies, visiting other agencies, collecting policies from other agencies themselves from around surrounding areas. to see how their policies can enhance each other. There may be shared services based on policies that they can do. They may have the expertise that they may lack in that department. So until they're trained up and able to do policies in a holistic way, then actually working with other agencies that may have that experience is cost effective. It builds collaboration. And again, community members, some may work with a major corporation. They may have worked in HR that have a lot of policy development experience that they can lend to the police department. And I think added value as well, and build relationships at the same time.
One quick follow-up, and then I'll turn it over to Don or whoever. And that is in terms of the community understanding these policies, then I'm assuming that in at least in your vision, to a large degree where it's possible, these policies should be transparent to the whole community. In other words, we should be able to see what they are, what they say, in order for the, granted, not tactical stuff, but the more general stuff, so that we can actually hold a sense of connectedness with the PD and how they are expected to be acting.
I agree. And with the current website, you can have a portal for those things that are not tactical as far as operation or impact of personnel issues, policies. Those things like that could actually be available to the community itself.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Okay, I could follow up on that, but I think I talked too much already, so I'm going to go to hands. And I see Jim, you've got your hand up, Jim Carroll, so I'm going to let you go first, and then Jeannie, and then Jean Connor. So go ahead, Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to say thank you to Dr. Lee and the other members of ICAP. I think you've done a wonderful job. And with respect to the implementation of points that you've made, or the recommendations that you made, I'd like to recommend to the select board and the town manager that going forward over the next 6-8 months, maybe a year, that the police chief come before us and talk about those recommendations and what steps he's taken so that it can be completely transparent to the public and let us know what's happening. Secondly, I think we have a really important opportunity here with the formation of community involvement boards to get those people involved and rid the town of their perception of an adversarial nature with the public. I don't think that the police intend for that, but we need to do the work of absolutely remedying that. And that's it. I have no questions, just wanted to give my thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. So long as I'm still chair, I think we're going to take it up a lot faster than in the next year. We're going to be taking this stuff up immediately and moving actively to set a calendar for considering this stuff and working through that which we can manage, that which is most significant and meaningful as soon as possible, and we'll keep working right through the list if we can. So, but we will take it up in session at our regularly scheduled meetings, and we will have conversations and move it forward then this summer. So I see a hand from Jeannie Jenkins. Go ahead, Jeannie.
Hi. So I'm actually really excited about the opportunities for bringing the community into the process. I know that slows things down in a sense, but I think that we will end up with a really good product in the end. So I think the only question I'm going to ask then is, as I read about the advisory board or standing working group or whatever form our community group takes, are there are there good models for us to look at in terms of size and composition and charge? And would you be able to talk with us at another time about how to think about a community our size with our kind of demographic in terms of how we go forward with this? I was really interested in looking at recommendation 7 because it seemed like it might be an interesting way into thinking about this. It's the one that says consider adopting a community policing model, such as policing by consent, where the department would meet with the community on a pretty regular basis. And it felt like that would get at a lot of the recommendations that are in here, like timely information, connecting with stakeholders, broadening representation of who is involved in this thinking, also finding out what people are thinking, and setting community goals. It also feels like I'm wondering if recommendation 7 might be a way into thinking about an advisory group. Who sort of has staying power? What are the issues that we want to tackle with the community group? How do people jump into this? I guess that's really my question. Dr. Lee, I'm looking to you.
Oh, okay. No, absolutely. Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, but basically getting that group together, finding out what the issues are, and just then at that point, you'll know the type of expertise you need on the board. So just pulling the people together to find out what the issues are. And I think you already started that when we started doing the community focus groups. You started to hear a lot of different things out there because the individuals will tell you. I mean, a lot of the things that we found over and over and over theme was mental health. Mental health was a major issue, but when we talked to mental health professionals there that want to offer their service and be a part of those boards as well. So you may have someone, a community group that may just want to focus on mental health. You may have another group that want to talk about homelessness. During this particular stage of what we're going through, the pandemic that we're going through, there may be another focus on that right now. So I think it's going to really play a role on what Bennington's needs are. And that's only going to come from internal and from meeting with individuals. The perception of fear, I think that needs to be addressed. I heard everyone. And here's the big thing. And I heard the speaker when he talked about the police department being beat up. They're not being beat up. When we talk about policies and we talk about procedure, any of us kind of feel uncomfortable when we're being looked at. I don't care who we are. We all do. But how we embrace it and turn it around for the positive to address these issues, that's where the real person comes out. That's what we're talking about. So we talked about critical issues that might be sensitive to some, but if we really care about what we're doing and we really care about our job, and I believe everyone does, we get past those things. And I know that the community, as passionate as they are, all they want is to have their voice heard. The police department wants respect. The community wants respect. We need to put together a group of individuals that can have that conversation, as difficult as it may be, to come up with something positive that's going to bring us all together. And it may be one meeting at a time. It's going to be one group at a time. So how that looks is how Bennington's going to approach it. I can't tell you, but I can tell you how to get it started. And that's one group at a time. And when you bring them together and they're heard, but more importantly, follow up. There's been this lack of complaint that we talk and there's no follow up. And I think the chair mentioned that he wants to move on these things quickly. I think the community, it's a big step in building trust to be able to say, okay, here's recommendations. If we wait a year or 2 years out, you're going to lose that trust. moving on it quick, trying to do something just to let them know that we're moving and we're listening and we're trying to make those small steps, one change at a time. I think the trust will come in one day at a time. It's not going to come overnight, but at least it'll start the foundation that you need to move forward.
Thank you for that. Jean, I see that you have your hand up. Go ahead, please.
Hi. It kind of piggybacks on what you just said. On page 45 of the report, it's the action plan. I guess when I'm looking at that, is that the specific order that you feel like we should tackle these topics, or is this just an action plan that these are the topics? I guess I'm really excited to get moving on moving forward, and I didn't know if that's the steps we should take these tasks on.
You know what? There was no specific order. These were tasks that needed to be addressed. The order will be best served when you get there. The resources that you may have available, whatever you think, like the website already started. Okay, so that's a resource that's already set aside. Some things will take place. We don't know everything that's been moved forward. So as you start to look in and dive, you may have some things already checked off. So you'll just grab things based on the financial resources, the intellectual resources that you have at that time, and then just take them in the order that you feel that you can complete in a short takeaway period of time.
Okay. The other thing, I was asked by someone about a definition of community policing, and I really like the statement at the top of page 15. It's the 21st Century Policing Task Force final report. It's a statement. And I guess this person was looking for some clarity, like what actually is community policing. I think we all think we know what it is, but it might be at some point in the future to really, really define what the components are of that, not only for us, but for everyone.
And when you ask that question to a group of professionals, you're probably going to get 50 different answers. I know we ask it in interviews of chief police all the time, but more so when you hear a response, the one thing you want to know is a philosophy. It's something that you believe in. It's something that you take and you hold within. It's not a program. It's not a check one-off. It's not doing a program per week, per month. It's a way of life. It's your engagement, as we talked about, building a community group, having a community liaison, having regular meetings, embedding them in decision-making in the police department, policies, everything. You become one. That's the community policing, where there's no separation between police and community. You become one. We always tell people, if you see something, say something. Well, that's all part of policing. Policing is only as strong as their citizen groups are to help them solve crimes. Community policing, that's what it becomes, a philosophy. What we believe in, what we feel, and what we do every day. It's no different than how we look at everything else we do as far as our biases. We all have them. So it's how we stay in check and balance of those things. So even as when we look at our community policing, we may not know everything. We may look and go to our community to help solve these issues, whether it be policy related, how we operate, how we wear our uniforms, how we approach people, how do we knock on your door, how do we approach you. It's a philosophy that's built in. So the best way I could tell you about community policing is not program, it's philosophy. Because anybody can do a program for a day or once a year. We have National Police Week out. We have National Night Out. It happens once a year. But community policing happens every single day, 24 hours a day.
Yeah, and that's really poignant, because that really points to the police have responsibility to make that happen, and the community has a huge responsibility to make that happen, and it's not going to work unless both step up.
Absolutely, and that also goes by training. They have community policing academies. We can engage internships, fellowships, engaging the people. getting the police department and the community involved on both ends. The more the community knows why the police department do what they do, they'll have a better understanding why. When we talk about implicit bias training, well, it's important that the community understands what implicit bias is as well. Sometimes they do what we consider, as one of my colleagues always says, implicit bias by proxy. Someone may have a bias, call the police, and they just took their bias and just passed it on to the police. And the police go and respond. And how that police officer responds, it becomes critical. And I'll use the Starbucks situation. Someone called the police and said there was someone sitting here and they looked like they were a criminal. The police responded, took an action without taking the time to investigate for themselves. They just took the call and reacted on the call. So this all becomes with training between the community, our business stakeholders, and the police department holistically, and that's the part of the philosophy that we build together.
Thank you.
Sarah, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead, please.
I think this was another just definition that I hope people read this and are question that want to know what this is. Policing by consent. If you wouldn't mind going over that definition.
Carl does that well.
So from what we discussed, I guess in past, policing by consent it's the approach that the community meets with the police department at regular established intervals, where the police department shares what their observations are for concerns for public safety and quality of life of things that the police can assist with, while the public also shares their concerns. So as a police professional, I might observe certain trends in crimes or certain environmental considerations that I think might contribute to crime that I would like to address to prevent crime or to deal with crime. The public may have a different perspective as to how the police department goes about handling those issues, also as to how much of a priority those issues are. And the purpose of the policing by consent is having those regular meetings where the public meets with the police department, they share these in an open forum, and then they identify metrics for success of what they want of what the community wants the police to do over the course of whatever the next period is, generally a year, and then what the metrics of success are. So if it's usually it's simple things like reducing crime trends or reducing certain types of crime, improving quality of life by addressing quality of life calls for service, but also it's in how the police go about doing it. Is it something that there's a major crime issue where there needs to be significant use of enforcement? Is it something that needs a lot of community education about a problem, such as driving issues or driving behavior that contributes to crashes or behavior that contributes to delinquency or to other issues within the community that isn't so much an enforcement issue, but it's something that can be addressed through education and prevention. So that's what the policing by consent approach is. It's discussing those issues, discussing the metrics for success, and then the police department reporting back on actions they've taken, as well as looking back at the data, looking back at how successful they've been in meeting those, and it being part of a partnership, as opposed to the police department just coming in saying, in your community, we observed these types of crime trends, and this is how we've handled it, without having any input at all from the community, particularly in the officer's demeanor and the actions that the officers take when they interact with the public.
Sarah, did that answer your question? Carl, it kind of begs a lot of other questions of things that we've been reading here. One of the head scratchers for me in the intelligence-led policing piece is how you could be doing hotspot policing without sort of doing redlining, or how you could be doing hotspot policing in the context of what you just suggested.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Are you saying how does hotspots policing fit in a policing by consent approach?
Yeah, I think I don't really understand hotspot policing, but it sounds a little bit like categorizing a neighborhood as one that you want to kind of keep an eye on in particular. And it sounds contrary to what you just said, and it sounds a little bit dangerous, potentially dangerous to me, in
Sure.
terms of taking us in the wrong direction. In terms of profiling and in terms of generalizing about people or certain areas.
Sure, and it can be if it's not used appropriately. Hotspot policing is essentially looking at the data, and you're looking for concentrations of ideally certain crime types. If you don't have concentrations of crime, then generally looking at concentrations of quality of life concerns. And then doing problem analysis to determine are those things that the police can help solve, or are those things that involve partnership from other stakeholders in the community, if it's social services, if it's mental health, but the things that are actually driving the hotspot. And the hotspot is essentially it's a statistically significant concentration of a certain type of event, whether it's a crime or whether it's a call for service type, that suggests that the concentration is significant in that area for a reason. And then the problem analysis is trying to understand what that reason is, and ideally addressing that through prevention. So that would be the professional component that the police would bring to policing by consent by using their analysis to identify these are the hotspots that we've identified. And again, looking at some of the crime rates that we observe for the town of Bennington, it would suggest that there's more quality of life concerns versus actual crime trends, which is a good indicator. But that's also where you use hotspots analysis to quantitatively identify what the concerns are, and then doing the problem analysis to also prevent over-policing, because you wouldn't want to have a report of just there being a certain number of crimes or a certain number of quality of life issues in a particular neighborhood, and then have the police just go in and try to enforce or have additional presence there trying to deter that type of crime if it's not statistically significant. So the hotspot is approach to, it's an objective way of looking at, is there a concentration of activity, of crimes or quality of life concerns that need to be addressed, doing the problem analysis in partnership with the community to identify the best approach for that and what the community's preferred approach is, and then going back and using the hotspot analysis to see if there's been a change in that. So I hope that helps to kind of.
No, I see. I think it's going to play into a lot of the things that we're going to have to work our way through. You know, I'm jumping around through my list, but recommendation 17 talks about revisit the policy on traffic enforcement to balance the need for safe roadways with building trust and procedural justice. And, you know, that kind of points to a comment in the report that said that the police's success in crash reduction and generally reduced crime rate throughout the town should be applauded. But at the same time, the department should be cognizant that these outcomes are not justification for damaged relationships with the community. There needs to be a balance. And it seems like you're balancing two very different things. And I was wondering how we would balance something like trust against crash data or trust against burglaries or something like that. But it sounds to me like what you're saying is through this community group, you work through that, where that balance point is. This is all paid for by taxpayers, obviously, so that it kind of gets down to that too.
Well, some of the traffic enforcement is through a NHTSA grant that was discovered. So that's funded through NHTSA as the Highway Traffic Safety Fund. So be aware of that. There are some obligations that when they receive that money, that they do some selective enforcement. And that should be educated to the community, that it's not Bennington tax dollars, but that is actual money that's received from a grant. So they will be mandated to, when they take that they have selective enforcement to reduce traffic accidents and everything else, but that needs to be supported with data as well. So you're not just out stopping cars just to stop cars to meet your goals and objective. And this is what I've talked about before, that we're not looking at the number of tickets, we're looking at the number of reduction in accidents. And that philosophy changes a whole way how we approach things. If I stop someone and give them a warning, and it has the same effect as giving someone a ticket, okay, having that rewarding someone based on the reduction of what accidents, but they're doing the traffic stops based on funding from NHTSA. And this came about through the study and then actually interviewing with the police, that seeing the traffic stops by itself doesn't give you an answer, because you have to balance your traffic stops and protecting the community. But then when you see the traffic stops and then you see the NHTSA grant, then you have an understanding on why so much selective enforcement. But that has not been, the community hasn't been educated on the funds, where that's coming from. We're not paying overtime for traffic enforcement. This is coming out of a traffic fund. That's something that should be maybe on the website, or given to the community to understand that this is your federal tax dollars, not Bennington tax dollars at work as it relates to traffic enforcement. But it still needs to be fair, partial treatment. There needs to be no racial profiling. All those things they need to do to protect themselves, and that's through data collection. They have to do a great job on data collection. And you'll hear that throughout everything we talk about. Data collection is the balance of everything, and it gives accountability to everyone involved.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And if the board will indulge me on one more point, kind of right along that line, it feels like one of the other things I don't understand entirely, and this is something I hope to understand a lot better as we go through this process. Recommendation 5 talks about traffic enforcement that supports officer discretion and provides training to officers to manage the privilege and discretion during traffic stops. And at some point in the report, it says that the data currently shows no significant differences in Bennington in the ratio of stops per race. And it seems like if we have no particular differences in stops by race, why would you want to add discretion in there, which seems like how does discretion fit in there? And that it seems like it could potentially be a dangerous tool if not used properly.
So if I could, Dr. Lee, I'll take a stab at zero tolerance, and then let you speak to some of the other components for discretion. So the key thing for discretion is, at the end of the day, zero tolerance is not a policy that you would want your officers to use or something close to that. Enforcement only has a limited deterrent effect. Ideally, you want the community to comply voluntarily with the law. So by properly training officers on use of discretion, sometimes enforcement's necessary, particularly if it's for specific deterrence for the individual that's committing a crime or committing an offense. Other times it's not. If you take away the discretion ability from the officers, then you're putting them in a situation where if they're going to do anything, they're going to have to take enforcement action. If they're taking enforcement action on people that otherwise would benefit from a warning or benefit from some other form of intervention besides enforcement, then you're severing the tie from the community with the police department. So you're making it so that the public is going to be less inclined to voluntarily obey the law and behave in an appropriate manner if it's driving behavior, if it's just regular behavior that would otherwise be criminal conduct. So that discretion is the very important component of it, whether it's traffic offenses, whether it's other offenses. And essentially, that's the key of what you're paying for your police officers, is to have that professional maturity to make those discretionary decisions regarding enforcement activity. So, Dr. Lee, anything to add?
No, I'm just going to just touch briefly. When you mentioned the issue about the stop as far as disparity, I think that'll come with better data collection. To be able to say right now, one way or the other, the data collection is very limited. We talked about that being an issue with the department. So I think that as we start to collect data correctly, properly, both on warnings as well as tickets, we'll be able to get a better understanding on trends and patterns of practice based on better data collection. So to answer your question right now, that'll come about as you start to see a more enhanced data collection process. Then we'll have we'll be able to tell better what is going on with the department as far as their stops are concerned.
Are there other communities around Vermont? I mean, I know they're collecting the data to the state required by law at this point, and I hear you saying that's not sufficient. But are there other communities around Vermont that have embraced this sort of higher level of data collection, and what might we look to as
Vermont State Police, the state police? I mean, because they're the depository for all the agencies, the department, as well as themselves. So utilizing them as far as how they collect the data, doesn't matter the size of the agency, it's the process of collecting the data, what's being collected, because they are the depository. That's the place that's collecting all the data from all the agencies. So they'll be able to give you a taste of what has been the best practice out there. The thing with Bennington was that there was a lag time on data submission. And that was based on the lack of either training, knowledge, or infrastructure in place to have that data collected in a timely fashion. So Now that that process has been addressed, we'll see a more enhanced understanding of data, and we'll be able to make better decisions on how to police. You'll know based on how many accidents on 4 or how many on 5 and everywhere else, you'll have an understanding where that selective enforcement needs to be and be able to support it with the data. And it won't be just randomly. And I think that's when we talked about selective enforcement. Right now, everybody's just going out doing what they want, right? Tickets at their discretion. I'll go here, I'll go there. But if it's driven by data, you're driven by the data on where I'm going to be. If crime is here, then it's not just about arresting your way out, it's providing the resources there to reduce crime. If accidents are here, it's about the resources to reduce the accidents. It's not saying we're going to go out and write this many tickets. This is what we're going to do to reduce the accidents.
Okay, I'm sorry to monopolize the conversation here for a minute. Are there other questions from the board? If not, I might look at recommendation number 25, which is the aggressive time frame should be set to set policy update and development. And I know from talking to many of the board members that this is something that we have an interest in, but we also aren't sure of, there's a lot we don't know about going through this process, and we don't want to do it in a half-baked way. We want to do it quickly, but we want to do it thoroughly. We want to involve the community deeply, and yet we don't want to belabor it to the point that people lose interest and wander off. So I wonder if, is this something that we might take up with you afterwards? Is this in terms of sequencing the punch list? I know you've talked about that a couple of times tonight already, but is this something that we might be able to take up with you at a future meeting, maybe, or after a future meeting, after we've had a chance to kind of digest this and talk about it at our own meeting, and then come back to you and try to figure out what that aggressive time frame might look like?
Yes. I would say that would be the best bet, because that also gives the department a chance to review some of the model policies that the team's already sent over, and to start working on their own as well, and to be able to report back to the select board.
Okay. Well, select board, I think at very least we should commit to picking this up at our next meeting and kind of let's not try to wrap up this tonight, because there's a lot to think about. I'm going to need to go back and watch this again, because again, it's a little hard for me to follow the train of the conversation and manage the people, but I would like a chance to hear the program again. And then maybe when we come together at our next meeting, we could have a wide open discussion about where we go next. Does that sound good to select board members? Yep, I see heads nodding.
Yes.
So, okay. And yes, I think what Jim Carroll's suggestion, get report back from town staff and chief of police, I think that will come, but I don't want that at the next meeting. I think I want the next meeting to be our first kind of take on this and where we think we want to go. And then maybe the meeting after that, we might look to town staff for a kind of comprehensive list of what we've done and what we haven't done. I see Jim Carroll's hand up, and he's a little hard to work in sometimes because he's such a shy guy. But let me call on you, Jim.
Yeah, that's a common trait that people recognize about me. With respect to the recommendations that have been made by IACP, are they willing to work with and review the chief's formulation of your recommendations?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Jim, and I would be surprised if they did. But Carl or Jesse, did you quite get that, or maybe you could rephrase that, Jim, just one more time, please?
All right. In the recommendations by IACP to the police department with respect to LGBTQ communication and interaction, as well as bias, would the folks from Dr. Lee and IACP members be willing to work with the chief in reviewing the development of those policies and recommendations within the department? that better?
Yes, we can do that as part of the implementation assistance. That's part of the scope of work that we have for this. And if it's something that goes beyond that, we've also, I believe, Megan, we've made references already for Crytek. So there are some grant funds that are available through the IACP for additional assistance, specifically on the policy issues, but also on some of the other recommendations that if it goes beyond that scope of what we've already gotten worked in for the implementation assistance, we could work to facilitate that in a longer term as well.
Very good. Thank
you. Gene Connor, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just thinking, as a person who likes to be able to plan, I think, and this sounds like a daunting process, but I think it would be really a helpful exercise if we mapped out like a timeline and benchmarks to kind of lead us through this. For me, that would be really, really helpful. And maybe that was always your plan, but to actually get it down on paper, and then we would really have a good sense of how long this is going to take and what we should do when. I think it would just crystallize it for us and be really helpful.
Maybe we could, maybe that could be an outcome of our next meeting as we decide what and how we want to move forward. And maybe we could come back to IACP for, to really map this out. And I feel like it's almost like we have a map of how to get there, but we don't have the mileage on it yet. We don't have the mileage indications on it yet. So we're going to need some help with that part. But I'm optimistic that this will help us. This will help us get there, and this will help the community understand the process and participate in the process as we go along. As we begin to wrap up, I guess I would like to acknowledge that this is the last time we're going to see IACP in this setting, I think. And I guess I would invite board members if they have any words that they'd like to say to IACP, and Stuart, town staff too, or Dan Monks, if either of you have anything you'd like to say, I would offer you this slot to say it in. Anybody? Go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah. To the folks from IACP, this is an area that I've sort of worked professionally in for the last 30 years or so of my career as a lawyer. And I have been exceptionally pleased with the quality of your work, but even more so with the quality of your interaction with us and with members of the community that I was privileged to be around when you were talking with them, and can only imagine what the other private conversations were like. But I just wanted to give my word of appreciation for the work you've put in so far. Look forward to tapping into your expertise in the months to come. You've set a lot of good recommendations for us to address as a community, as a department, and as a select board, and I'm very thankful for your work.
Thank you, Bruce. Nice words. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, I guess I would just like to echo what Bruce has said. I think that the report and the assessment, as difficult as it might appear to those folks who are being assessed, I think that the department has taken it to heart, and I think they are prepared, perhaps more prepared than folks in the community are at the present time to move this thing forward and get some positive outcomes. So I thank the IACP for their work, and we look forward to perhaps talking again sometime.
Great. Okay, Jeannie, go ahead. I see your hands up.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you as well. And I do look forward to working with you in the future, because I think we will need your expertise as we figure out timeline and pathway forward, and the only way we can do that, I think, quickly is with your help. So thank you for what you've done so far, and thank you for what you're going to do in the future.
Just to keep them on the line.
That's it.
All right. Well, it's about 8:30. It's a little after 8:30 at this point. Jean, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, just really quickly. I think I mentioned this to a few of you, maybe I don't remember when it was, a week or so ago, but as I was going through this report for probably the fourth time, I had this feeling, a similar one to when schools were suddenly asked to not only teach, but to be social workers and psychiatrists and to feed children. And they, their job has grown exponentially, and they're now doing things that they never dreamed they would be doing. And I get the feeling, and you said it tonight, Dr. Lee, that policing is a different animal now. There's a lot more emphasis on mental health, and police forces are finding themselves having to do things they probably never thought they would have to do. And I just wanted to recognize that it's hard. It's a hard animal to just move and suddenly start doing things. And I think our police force is poised and ready to take on the challenge, and we're certainly willing to support them any way we can.
I agree, and I'm going to add my thanks to everybody else, and just say this is very, very fraught work, and it's nuanced, and it's full of difficult turns and emotions, and a lot of things that are hard, and we have to push through it. We know we have to do it, and yet doing it without the skills to do it, we could make a real mess of this. And if not for the skills that IACP are offering us, I think we would be in quite a lot of trouble. So thank you very much for sticking with us. Curtis Reed has also been wonderful. The Jim Baker was a help when he was down here too. So thank you very much for sticking with us, and we do look forward to working with you. Before I end this meeting, is there anything you'd like to say, IACP, as we head out the digital door here?
Well, for me, I'd just like to say we appreciate the opportunity working with the town of Bennington and continuing to work on the recommendations for the report on having those implemented and getting the police department to a better place. Dr. Lee?
Yeah, I concur. Again, it's been a pleasure working with each and every one of you. I know a lot of you are very passionate. When I went doing the community forums, I was not surprised to see many of you there and being very supportive of the community. You sat back, you listened, you observed, but the fact that you were there and you took the hard questions of the community there, and you stood and you were there to listen to them. That's their value, and I think that anyone can appreciate it. And it gave me that much more emphasis that I felt a part of Bennington through this whole project. I still feel a part of Bennington, and I really enjoyed working with the officers, the community, and the board. So I think it's been a pleasure working with every one of you.
Great. Thank you. And Megan, it's been a pleasure working with you too. You've been super helpful throughout. So. All right. Well, I'm going to end this meeting. I guess I'd call for a vote from the select board to close this meeting with our thanks to IACP. We'll convene at our regularly scheduled next meeting time. Do I have a motion to close the meeting, please?
So moved.
A second. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Jim. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, this meeting is closed, and thank you again, IACP. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Good night, Bennington.
Thank you.
Good night.